Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by Ideate Software. Be sure to check out all of their great Revit applications designed to increase your productivity. I've hit the record button. We're recording BIM Thoughts, and people are probably listening. A lot of people are listening now. We have at least, I would say 57 people now.
At least.
Or more. Maybe even more.
I attribute that to Carl.
I give Carl all the credit. So you already heard Dana DeFilippi. She's here with us again, the great Dana DeFilippi. And Carl storms himself. He stormed right in, and he's here. And we're joined by a special guest, the one, the only, the incomparable Kelly Cohn.
Oh, dear Lord.
Oh, dear Lord. Help us all. So, Kelly, redefine yourself.
Well, I try and do that on a regular basis because life's just no fun otherwise.
Right.
Gosh, redefine myself. That's quite the gauntlet you've thrown down.
Well, last time it was define yourself, and you're here again, so you can't define yourself again. You have to redefine yourself.
That makes perfect sense.
It does.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if anything of professional value has changed since then. I still play with laser scanners.
Yes.
I still play with computer vision algorithms that extract information out of them, and I feel all of a sudden I feel like I'm letting you guys down. There's no change. I mean, the only thing that's different, right, is I just basically haven't gone anywhere for 6 months because of COVID, and so
I know it feels like 6 months.
I'm incomplete as a human being because I don't go to conferences and see my friends.
March, April, May, June. Oh, it has been 6 months, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Holy poo.
Yeah.
Wow.
What does that look like for you, Kelly? What does 6 months at home look like?
Well, I mean, Dana, I'm basically, I know this may shock you, but I'm actually an introvert. So I basically am a hermit in my personal life, and given there have been a lot of things changing in my personal life recently, but we won't go into that. But
good, I don't want to.
Yeah, amen. But yeah, nonetheless, it's like, I kind of hide in my home and do things I like to do, and spend time with my family, and then go to conferences, and I get my entire year's worth of extroversion in the roughly sum total of 6 weeks that I spend at conferences in a given year. And so I don't know, I'm just missing that sum total of 6 weeks, but it's amazing how it takes a toll on you.
Well, what about professionally? How does it look? Right? How has it changed for you in terms of your role and what you do day to day, being at home? Were you at home before? I know Carl probably didn't see much of a change, right? Carl was at home.
Worked at home, stayed at home. Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. I've been working from home since moving to Clear Edge, so almost coming up on 5 years now. And so professional life hasn't changed much aside from minus the conferences, and we talked about this on a different event. It's that played a critical key in our business, for a variety of reasons. And so I do spend a lot of time trying to make up for the fact that we don't have conferences to filter into our sales mechanism, and it just that absorbs a surprising amount of time. But outside of that, not much change.
Yeah.
So with that surprising amount of time that filling in for not having that 6 weeks of conferences go, what is your feeling about virtual conferences becoming the new norm?
It makes me die on the inside.
So you're saying there's what we've spent the last 6 months doing isn't going to be a replacement for the good old face-to-face meetings?
No. I even at in my former life at Beck, most of my team was remote, and so all my direct reports were remote. So, I've been working virtually, at least direct reports and core team members for, over a decade now. And so I feel like I've got a pretty good feel for how to do it well. My general observation is you can't build relationships virtually. You can maintain relationships virtually. And so, trying to take a relationship that doesn't exist and create it, online is orders of magnitude harder than doing it in person. So, I think, we will still see a key role for conferences in our business and, in our industry, and for all the kind of face-to-face engagements in business in general, because it just, people are social creatures, and there's a reason things have happened the way they've happened up to 6 months ago, and it's because people needed that.
Right.
Well, I even think that presenting at conferences was kind of a push for me professionally, right? Like even kind of getting up there on the stage and, that being a highlight to my year, that being kind of a pushing factor in what I was, developing and how I was going to kind of shape what was happening that year.
Yeah. Yeah. And just so much happens at conferences that doesn't happen in the classroom. And I think that's the loss with the virtual events, because, you have what happens in the classroom and that's it. And I've talked to a couple more people since Carl and I last spoke about this. And I really do think that for kind of beginners, for people trying to get into technology for the first time, a specific technology for the first time, that virtual conferences, there's really not much of a downside for them, because, I think when I think back to my first conferences, I was in absorb mode. I went to classes in every session. I took notes. I did as much as I could to, take in what was being, dished out in the classes. And then I was exhausted and, and overwhelmed. And then I would go back to my hotel room and, but after I think you become relatively competent at a given technology, conferences, expand dramatically in terms of where you gain your value. And that's, nobody that I've seen has figured out how to replicate that virtually yet.
What I see is in conferences is your first couple, you really don't know what to do, so you go to all the classes and all of this and the events, and you stand in the corner and you drink your drink and you go back and you go to sleep and you go back to your office and you share what you learn, and away you go and you get to go to the next one. And as you start to go to more, then you start to recognize people that like Kelly and Dana and Carl and myself. And then you start to talk, and those sidebar conversations is what becomes the valuable part for you in those second and third, fourth conferences. Because the sidebar conversations is where you can get in to the nitty gritty of what you've learned in one of the classes and find out, people really do that, or are they just showing off, kind of a thing. And you can get in and discuss how you think you might implement some of that technology. And then later on, as you become more and more a veteran of the conference, that second part, not the classes the classes aren't the main course. The main course are the keynote talks to me, the vendors, and the sidebar conversations you have with your friends that you've made over the years and your trusted advisors, if you will, on what's going on. So that's what I miss about the conference. And you don't get that part with virtual conference. You could try to replicate it, but you're not going to get it. There's no way you can get that, because you can't. You can drink Grey Goose and cranberry juice all you want in front of a virtual conference, but the only thing you do is you pass out in your own room instead of passing out in the bar, and your friends carry you to your room.
Yeah, I was going to say, Bill, spoken like a man with experience. Yeah, I will say I have had a lot of fun with virtual happy hours since all this COVID madness, and doing creative things at COVID happy hours just to kind of keep morale up and, keep people engaged and talking, maintaining kind of, personal connections, again, maintaining personal connections within the company. And so that's been a lot of fun. All sorts of goofy stuff has emerged.
Mm-hmm. I haven't really partaked in virtual happy hours too much.
Yeah, I've interestingly, I've been itching to experiment with this, but they've got these kind of breakout sessions now in Zoom, and I've got to figure out how to use them, because my intent for this, because the problem with the virtual happy hours, right, Bill, is that, as you said, there's 57 people and only one of you can talk at a time, because we all know how impossible it is to do a virtual meeting with multiple people talking at the same time. But the breakout session. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to create some dummy Zoom accounts, because for this next one for our company, I'm in the middle of the pandemic. I also bought a house and moved. I do not recommend this, by the way. But I'm going to set up a computer in a couple different rooms or locations, and then have each one logged into a breakout session. And then have people move between breakout sessions, so there can be 4 or 5 conversations going on at the same time, just like you would at a house party. So I'm going to try and do it right. See if we can have some fun with that. But innovation.
Interesting. We're thinking about Discord as opposed to Slack for our BIM thinkers to share and talk, because Slack it's a great platform, but it's a pain in the butt for the free version to get invites and people to go. There's a lot of administration involved. Where Discord is, people can join and away you go, and you kick them out if you don't like them. So we're thinking about that. I don't know if you've had any experience with that.
The only Discord experience I've had after one of our virtual happy hours at the company, we hopped onto a Discord server and some other server to do a game. We kind of had a after party game night with a bunch of our younger employees, and that was a lot of fun. But I have to say, I have not wrapped my head around Discord yet, so I
haven't either.
I don't think I can speak intelligently about it.
But we do have a BIMThoughts Discord channel, if anyone's interested in joining. And let me see what it's called.
There you go.
I think it's just called BIMThoughts. Yeah, it's called BIMThoughts.
Sowing discord amongst the BIM community.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see the metrics of attendance after these virtual conferences, despite them being free. And, I know that there's some memberships that you can get and different things like that, but I think the basis of it is free, right? From what I understand. But I'm still...
AU is free this year.
Yeah, and the DBEI events, right?
Yeah, the Debbie events.
Debbie Events, exactly. But unfortunately, I think that there is something really to be said about being in a place for 3 to 5 days and being forced into, rather than going to work and, having your deadlines, all your bosses know you're at this conference. They paid for you to be at this conference. They want you to learn. They want you to come back and bring all this information, right? I think that there's more, kind of a push to really absorb information and to have the backup, to be able to say, hey, my boss knows that I'm here. Obviously, I, can't submit anything, or, I'm going to be working after hours, can't drink too many Grey Goose and cranberries because I have to do a little bit of work. But, I think that there's more participation that happens in addition to, the collaboration, those sidearm conversations that unfortunately we're not going to see with the virtual events.
Right. Well, as you know, I live in Las Vegas, and the
Everything
best
is
AU
down there.
Well, the best AU I attended was in Florida.
Really? Just because you got to get out, go away.
I was away from the office.
And yeah, I mean, because I feel like you typically just do a day, right? You usually just come for a day, do the day pass.
For the last few times, I've just done a day pass, because I get more out of that second part. I get more out of going to a couple classes and then chatting with my friends.
But that's harder to justify when you got to fly somewhere, right? You can't just go and fly for the day, and it's harder to justify it that way, I guess.
I mean,
Yeah.
depending on which airline you fly, the flights are cheaper than the hotel sometimes. So don't overlook the 1 day AU experience. I think my best
That's
yeah.
true.
I think my best AU was a 1 day AU experience, and I didn't even have a hotel room. I flew in at like 3 p.m. on like a Wednesday, had no hotel, and then I just was literally there for like 32 hours or something nonstop, and then like at 10 p.m. the next day I flew out. I think I crashed for like 2 hours on somebody's couch in their hotel room, just because I needed like a little 2 hour quick wink. But that was actually, I think, my best AU ever. But
Wow.
This all really reinforces my opinion that that Debbie needs to have a BILT Cruise because everybody
so we
gets
can
out.
all get
stuck
Wouldn't that have
together
been
for
something
months.
if it was in early March
Oh,
and
that would
then
have
we
been
all got stuck on the cruise ship for 6 months?
that would have been so fun. I mean, I literally, that would have turned 2020 from like the worst year ever to like the best year ever in a
Yeah,
nutshell.
it
You
would have
know,
been something.
just like
I wonder if they would have if they charged the outrageous price for internet if you got stuck on the cruise ship for 6 months.
I
Because
mean,
we'd have to get some work done.
they
But I
couldn't.
think a lot of those people are getting reimbursed, like huge settlements
Oh
are
yeah, they're
happening.
getting reimbursed, but still, I mean, I don't know. It would be an interesting 6 months to be with a bunch of Revit people.
As long as they came to court and there was there was 5G, I'd be okay. Like I could just tether and I'd be all right.
Yeah, but I will tell you though, working at home, I worked from home now since 2016, full time at home. But I would go back to Irvine once a week, so I'd go on a Wednesday or a Tuesday once a week, just to ground myself and see what's going on and get my work that I needed to do for the next week. And this last week is probably the first week where I've really missed going back to Irvine, and I have to get back in the saddle again pretty soon.
It's telling when it takes 6 months for you to miss going back to Irvine.
It is telling when it takes 6 months. Yeah.
That might be
Yeah.
Irvine though.
It may be Irvine. Now, if this was really the first week that I have missed it.
Missing the cohorts in Irvine, the travel combination.
The whole experience. The travel, the talking with people, the meetings, the getting grounded on your projects, and all that stuff. Missed the whole part. Now, in the previous times, it's you're missing one part of it every now and then, like, oh, I miss the people, or I miss having the one-on-one meetings, or I miss those kinds of things. But this is the first week I've missed it all. So what is new in the 3D scanning world? There's got to be something new from the last time we talked.
Oh goodness. What's interesting to me is that looking back at the 2008 recession, well, I mean the 2007 through 9, or I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
Coming out of that was actually a fantastic time to be a technologist in this industry because, when work started ramping up, there was all this stuff that needed to get done, and companies had downsized, and and technology all of a sudden became like a key component to solving some of these labor shortages and ramping problems that companies had, and that was a huge push for Beck, for instance, in really converting fully over to Revit from AutoCAD and Form Z. And so the thing that's been interesting about this is with all the work from home, just seeing all the different ways reality capture has been used to kind of solve the problem of not being able to go to the job site, or not being able to go to the office, or not being able to, or work stoppages. Like, we that was also at Beck, we had done a couple projects with laser scanning in like 2007 and 2008, just like one or two a year. And then as we came out of the recession, we got hired by clients to go start jobs that had stopped, and companies that had gone bankrupt and couldn't finish the job and blah blah blah. So we probably had like 8 or 9 jobs that were in that situation that we picked up in 2010 or 2011, and you had no idea what somebody else built. You had no idea how far the job was. You had drawings, but you don't know where they stopped. They didn't like take the time after their work was canceled to go out and document and hand the owner partial as-builts, right?
Right. They just stopped.
So, it's like,
thank you, Mr. Customer, for firing. Let me go ahead and get some as-builts done so you know exactly where we stopped.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, don't worry about hiring us back. We just want to make sure we do the right thing and give you all the documentation.
So like it was a huge, boost for reality capture at the time. We bought our first laser scanner. We hired up some people to operate it and do modeling, and like all of this came out of that recession, and one way or another. And we're seeing a lot of the same signs in this recession because there have been a lot of projects that got stopped. There's companies that are struggling. There's, and so I really think this is I'm always a, silver lining kind of person. And y'all know this because y'all spend too much time drinking with me at conferences. But, like I always look for the silver lining. And I think there's going to be some real opportunity coming out of this recession for reality capture technology to fill, like even during this recession to fill a need. Virtual job site walks, things like that. We're seeing, companies like Struction Site getting, really big adoption, all of a sudden, because it's real easy to have one person go to the site with a 360 camera. It's a lot harder to have 7 people go to the site, wear masks and socially distance while they do a walkthrough. And so, we're seeing that now, but, there's going to be this big need for documentation of all these projects that have stopped or been put on hold. And there's really not a good mechanism to do it, short of going out and laser scanning it and comparing it against what was supposed to be there. And so, it may be self-serving silver lining here, but I really do think that this has highlighted the value of these kind of reality capture tools in our toolbox as builders and designers and engineers, making the built environment. Because it allows us to handle these very unexpected situations much more gracefully than we ever could, 15 years ago.
So if a firm hasn't done 3D scanning before, and coming out of this they see a great need for it, and is it better for them just to go out and get all the stuff and start, or should they hire someone to do the work and provide them with the information they need?
Hire a consultant. Yeah, I mean, listen, I would love to the self-serving silver lining. I would love to say, oh, go out and buy a scanner from our parent company, and go buy our software and go do this all yourself. It's so easy, but it's not so easy yet. Give us a couple more years. But like anything as a company, if it's not your core practice, or if you don't think it's going to be your core practice, that's what consultants are for. And, go out and hire somebody. I mean, I always advise people, if your firm is facile with Revit and you model, and that's part of your core business to deliver documentation and stuff like that, don't have a consultant do the model. I mean, that's crazy. Right? I mean, you're good at that, and I guarantee you the consultant won't be as good at that as you because it's not their only job, right? But at least the scanning and the registration and all the stuff that you have no reason to know anything about and have never done before, that stuff's actually harder than it looks, just like design is harder than it looks, just like engineering is harder than it looks, just like construction is harder than it looks, right? It looks easy from the outside, and then you get into it and you go, oh, wow. What did I get myself into?
So I thought this was going to be easy.
Yeah. So like, ask Wes sometime how it was doing scans for BILT in Seattle a couple of years ago. He was like, oh, it's so easy. And then it's like, oh, he couldn't get anything to register. I was like, oh man, what do I do now? Hire a consultant to do the stuff that's not core to your business and get a feel for the workflow and the process, and using the data to make models, and go out to people that can help you with that. Get tools to help you with that, right? And then if you see the value in it for more jobs, not just this big bump that I think people are going to see in need for reality capture short term coming out of this, but if you see that, wow, we could use this on a lot of our jobs, then go out and start investing in the hardware and the software to do the registration, do all this other stuff. Once you've validated the process and the workflow, use a consultant, effectively do some pilot projects by having a consultant do the stuff you don't know how to do. And then you can figure out, does this make sense for our kind of day-to-day deliverable, our core business? Is it valuable? And then, hey, if it is, whoosh, I'll sell you software and hardware any day of the week. Give it a good shot first, and have a consultant do the stuff you don't know how to do.
Do you have a metric or a feel for where that sweet spot should be? I mean, obviously, you're doing a heritage restoration. It's a one-off gig. You need to do some scanning. Makes sense to hire somebody in to do that work for you. Whereas if you're doing a lot of construction, it seems to be that you bring a consultant in, it works to be all right. You want to take that next step. Is it, if you think you're going to be using a scanner on every project, if you think you're going to be using a scanner a couple times a week, when do you start seeing people getting the benefit of investing versus continually hiring a consultant?
I mean, gosh, Carl, that's a very deep question. Short form answer is I think somewhere around my 8th or 9th year at Beck, and I was there for 10 and a half years. Somewhere around my 8th or 9th year at Beck, I ceased being a technologist and started being a businessman. My answer is you just gotta do an ROI calculation, because like at Beck we'd done 5 or 6 jobs where we hired a consultant to do the scanning, and what we realized, year 1 we did 1 job and it was cool. Year 2 we did 2 jobs and it was cool. Year 3, like, we did 3 or 4 jobs, and I realized that the consulting fees I paid out in that year, we probably paid out $230,000 of consulting fees in that year. We did 4 big projects, and it was like, well, shoot, a scanner costs $120,000. I could hire a full-time person and still be under the budget that I spent on consulting this year. And I can't keep that person occupied 100% of their time, but just looking at dollars out, I could buy the scanner, hire a person, and we can afford, because of the downtime, to go through some learning curve and not be, at a project level profitable, because at the end of the day, the markup that we're paying for a consultant exceeds, whatever learning curve we're going to be paying. And we only saw that increasing. We knew we were going to do more jobs the next year and more jobs the next year. So it's not a technology, it's a business decision. It's like, holy crap, we paid out this much money. We could have bought a scanner and hired a person full time this year, and we would have probably come out better for it. So we did. And that way the next year we came out better for it. And so, I mean, I just think you got to look at it as a business and figure out, is this a line of service that you would rather pass through to your client as a cost, or would you rather have it in-house and be able to make margin on it? And you can't do that for 1 or 2 jobs, but, and again, size matters, of course, right? So, we were a big construction company. We did big projects. So, a contract with a laser scanning company, that was a $50,000 to $80,000 contract to go out and scan the kind of projects we were building, right? So, if you're doing small jobs, 4 or 5 jobs doesn't justify it. But if you're doing big jobs, 4 or 5 jobs, whoosh, you can buy a scanner real quick.
I guess bringing it back to the comment of size matters. With today, with the technology and the prices coming down and a much more wider gamut of what type of scanning technology you can get from the small handheld or near handheld that'll do you a pretty good job for a pretty square interior quick retrofit versus, something where you're doing survey level scanning. Big difference now in price and quality of the hardware. How does that figure into the merchandise, or not the merchandise, into your thought? Like, because that technology wasn't necessarily available back in your Beck days.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. And I think you still get what you pay for. And I think what's changed a lot in the last 5 years is that there's kind of opened up what I would call this prosumer market, where accuracy is not particularly important. 10 years ago, every scanner was, each measurement was plus or minus a couple millimeters, and you couldn't find a scanner that was less accurate than that. And that's because the only use case for a $120,000 instrument was high accuracy, right? Now you can go out and buy a BLK, for 22, 30 once you buy the software, right? 30,000 ish dollars once you get all the software you need. It's not very accurate, but if you're just trying to get a general sense of the space and you don't care if you're, an inch or two off, over the whole building, because that's better than you're going to get out of as-built from the client, then that's an amazing value proposition, right? And then you don't have to do that many jobs to justify it, or that big of jobs to justify it. I think, if you really need accuracy, you're still, looking at scanners and the, total cost of ownership for, scanner, hardware, software, all that. You're still looking in the, $80, $90, $100,000 range, as kind of an entry point for, high survey grade accuracy scanners. But you can certainly go downstream from that, and if you don't have that kind of survey grade accuracy as a requirement. And then mobile scanners are just amazing productivity tools, but again, you sacrifice a lot on accuracy. But it is a much more complex landscape now, and it just, this is one of those areas where I just recommend, if people are thinking about it, that they go find some air quotes experts. They go find some people that are very familiar with the kind of wide range of technology and the pros and cons of those technologies, and that they're not just relying on a reseller or a vendor to give them that information, because obviously resellers and vendors are biased, and want to sell hardware and software. But, go talk to some people that are out there, that can kind of weigh those things without that bias of trying to move a piece of hardware, or move a piece of software. So, because it's way more complicated now than it was 10 years ago.
And with that, you're giving me perfect segues, and I promise I'll let other people talk after this. But what do you think of the idea? And I've heard this on a few other technology podcasts in the last couple of years, that eventually the preciseness and the quality of photogrammetry might render something like a high-end laser scanner useless. Maybe not tomorrow, but maybe 5-10 years down the road.
Oh gosh, this is like, Carl, this is one of my favorite things. So here's the problem, right? And I think I talked to Marcelo about this on one of his podcasts a year or two ago. But photogrammetry algorithms, it's understanding the history of technology is really important for understanding the future of that technology, right? Just kind of diving in and looking at what technology is now doesn't really give you a picture of what it can be or what it was. So photogrammetry is basically a tool designed for civil engineering and spies and governments, and they are designed, all the algorithms, all the IP that's underneath photogrammetry was really designed for naturally non-reoccurring images, right? So go take satellite imagery, right? Or fly a plane over and take imagery. And, there is no part of a forest that repeats the pattern of the other part of the forest, right? There's no part of the topography that repeats the pattern. And so the whole kind of fundamental underpinnings of photogrammetry is that you have naturally varied non-reoccurring patterns, and this allows the algorithms to find unique feature points and then match one image to another image, and then provided you have enough information about the camera characteristics, its optics, its resolution, all that kind of stuff, you can then do lots of relatively complicated math, and you can reconstruct a 3D scene from it just the way that our brains do from our eyeballs. How often do you find that buildings have naturally non-reoccurring patterns, Carl?
Well, you would think not very often, but with today's weird organic patterns, it's becoming more common. Although you're right, they're not naturally unreoccurring, but you know what I mean.
So
what
Frank
happens
Gehry could use it.
every time you have a spline curve? What happens on the job site? They reconstruct it as a series of arcs.
True enough.
Arcs are not non-reoccurring patterns; they are reoccurring patterns. And so, and this is the problem. Brick, it's a repetitive pattern. Tile is a repetitive pattern. Wood flooring has repetitive patterns overlaid on top of organic non-reoccurring patterns. Thank God. Right, you've got paint on walls, which have no pattern. and so the challenge with adopting photogrammetry into vertical construction is that the kind of fundamental premise upon which the entire intellectual foundations of photogrammetry were based, that premise is no longer true. And so anybody that's tried to use photogrammetry on a new building inside of it with a bunch of walls with lights turned on, you will rapidly discover that photogrammetry just falls apart terribly. And so, maybe at some point in the future, photogrammetry will replace LiDAR as a technology for taking measurements in vertical construction, but I don't think that's like 2 or 3 or 5 or even 10 years. I mean, I think that we will need sophistication to do things like compensate for light fixtures automatically so that light blur on wall doesn't get picked up as a keyframe, as a key point that's moving based on your camera moving, right? You'll need all sorts of correction algorithms. You'll also need much higher resolution imaging sensors than we have right now, because the accuracy of photogrammetry is fundamentally bounded by the resolution of the camera and your distance to the target. So photogrammetry is phenomenal for historic preservation of like a statue, because you can be really stinking close to it, and it's old, which means there's moss and stains and all sorts of naturally non-reoccurring patterns on it to generate key points. So, but when you go to like a new construction, it's just photogrammetry starts to drop out accuracy. So as a kind of QA/QC tool, or just kind of looking to see what's there, it's probably good enough already. But if you want to understand if something was installed to within a quarter of an inch of where it's supposed to be, it ain't there, and it's not going to for a long time.
Maybe it has to be photogrammetry 2.0, where it's not just the idea and the algorithms behind current photogrammetry, but we're incorporating real-time location like SLAM technology, and we're putting that all together. But where basically the idea is that we can get an accurate model that doesn't have to rely on billions and billions of points and registering, but something a little bit different.
You're talking about sensor fusion, Carl.
Well, I didn't know I was talking about sensor fusion, Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, that's. I mean, ultimately, if you think about measurement technology, whether you go high tech with lasers or in photos, photographic reconstructions, or whether you're talking about measuring tapes and laser distos, ultimately, measurement technologies. Almost every measurement technology has upsides and downsides, right? The benefit of sensor fusion is that you can take a technology that has certain strong points and certain weak points, pair it with a technology that has different strong points and weak points, such that the two together are complementary, and make up for each other's weak points. And this is what's sitting on your cell phone right now. This is what most of the, actually, what all of the, people that are working on self-driving cars, including Tesla, are using. And Tesla is famous for not using LiDAR because it's expensive, but they're using sensor fusion between GPS, photographs, and sonar right, to kind of figure out what their cars need to do. It's still sensor fusion. They're just not using LiDAR. Whereas, Google's using LiDAR and sonar and GPS and cameras, and, they're trying to use everything. And so it's those offer promise. So, like, photogrammetry might be a great tool to infill data in lower res LiDAR captures, for instance, or to capture data on surfaces that may be a reflective surface for the laser, but maybe, for instance, you could figure out glass, and where glass is by using a combination of LiDAR and photographs. So there's all sorts of cool stuff you can do with sensor fusion. That a lot of companies are experimenting with, but it's photogrammetry is not going to fundamentally replace LiDAR as a technology for quite a long time in vertical construction, just because of all those limitations. But sensor fusion, might make traditional $80,000 laser scanners somewhat irrelevant, sooner.
One question that I've been running into, especially with BIM 360, and there doesn't really seem to be a wonderful way working from home, is where do these giant files live?
Oh, that is, yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you're having that issue too, and I'm not the only one.
Oh God, everybody's having that issue right now. I mean,
it's such a problem.
I can't tell you how many times, like, I've been in conversations and people are like, "What do you mean your software's not cloud based?" And then I'll be like, "You don't understand." Like, in this, I've got a project that has a terabyte of scan data. I can literally process that data, extract 130,000 pipes, 1,800 walls, uh, you know all the ductwork, all the structure. I can do that in my software, in the same amount of time it takes me to upload the entire terabyte to the cloud, right? So, like, why in God's name would I make all of my software cloud based when the customer can get the results faster by running it locally? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So it is, but that's a finite problem, right, Dana? Because
I hope so.
five real 5G will be rolling out, over the next couple years, and my new house is like in the middle of nowhere, and I have gig service to my house for download, not for upload, right? In another 5 years, the landscape is going to be dramatically different in terms of bandwidth, and in another 10 years, certainly. It's just that is still advancing rapidly, and it's a problem with a finite bound to it. And so, at some point our software will be cloud based, because you'll be able to upload your terabyte project to the cloud in an hour and a half. And when that's possible, then we can scale compute across instances and, dump out results so much faster, and it'll be wonderful and beautiful. And there's some cool things out there. There's some cool platforms out there. We've got something called Collage Web that's a great distribution platform for point clouds. There's Cintu. There's, I could name, Pointera. I could probably name, 5 or 6 if I thought about it, and probably there's 10 of them out there that really do help streamline the distribution of point cloud data, even though the data sets are massive. But none of those solutions, I think, are perfect, are really, really good solutions for our industry quite yet. They're just too nascent. But they're nice to have as compared to shipping hard drives. So maybe they're not perfect, but they're better than nothing. So definitely some cool stuff out there to play around with if you're working with point clouds and you haven't looked at some of these cloud-based distribution tools. So
one of the takeaways I've gotten from this conversation so far was when you're talking about taking advantage of the slow, of being slow right now, if you're slow and not so busy. If you are slow and not so busy, now's a good time to start learning something. Get on LinkedIn Learning and start learning something, or get on something else and start experimenting. Learn Dynamo. That really hit home to me in this conversation as opposed to what you thought would hit home for me, probably. But I think that's pretty important too.
Spot on, Bill. I mean, I think it's easy for people to get caught up in, kind of, oh gosh, it's slow. What do I do? I've got a bunch of friends that are, have been, furloughed temporarily, and people who've been laid off. And, the number one thing that I recommend is that they, while they're in between jobs or while they're furloughed, pick up new skills. Take that time you would have spent going to work to learn new skills. We've kind of, it's not like a big thing we're publishing, but at ClearEdge, we've got some programs in place. If somebody wants to learn to use our software, we'll get you a free license. If somebody wants to, we've got sample data sets. You don't have to have your own scanner to do this, right? And I know a lot of other companies are doing similar things. It's kind of just making a phone call and being like, hey, I really want to learn this, and I'm unemployed. I'm in between things. Can you guys hook me up and help me out? It's business development for us. We'd be stupid to say no, but there are some companies I think that are not doing it, but we're happy to say yes, because we totally get it.
Get your drone certification if you've always wanted to do that. If you're slow right now, there's all sorts of different things you can do to make yourself more marketable. There you go. You're pretty smart, aren't you? There's plenty of things you can do to make yourself more valuable or marketable to your company, or to a new company, or hopefully to your existing one. Make yourself stand out. I read a thing yesterday where LinkedIn Learning is giving away a lot of courses. Microsoft is giving away, well, not giving away certifications. They dropped the certification testing pricing down to $15 a test. So there's lots of things out there.
I think a lot of companies are this is a crisis and everybody's in tough straits right now. Everybody's sales have declined, but I do think a lot of companies are doing a good job of, trying to find ways that they can, in their own way, provide value or help out, while things are kind of in this little pickle that we're in. And it's nice to see, and got to take advantage of those things if you can. And it's a good opportunity.
Good opportunity. Well, Dana, I'm sure you have at least one more question.
I really hope that we can have a vodka cranberry in, where is it, Denver next year. That would be probably the next conference. What do you think will be the next big thing next year, Kelly?
Honestly, I think the next big thing next year is going to be a lot of investment into just core processes. Like I would love to say there's some like new cool whiz bang fun fancy technology, but coming out of recessions, companies really invest in productivity because they are short resources. And so, I think you're going to see, broader, rapid adoption, just like we've seen this year, rapid adoption of virtual conferencing tools because you have no other choice. I think next year we're going to see a lot of kind of just, oh gosh, this thing helps us eke out 3% productivity. So, because those things are super attractive at 200 person firms, that 3% productivity makes a big stinking difference at. So not necessarily the fancy crazy stuff, but the just the kind of core fundamental improvement technologies are going to be the big trend, I think, next year, which may be disappointing to some, but I told you guys I switched from being a technologist to being a businessman in my 8th year of Beck, and I don't think I've really changed. So that stuff also excites me, because that's the difference between a 3% margin and a 3.5% margin, and that's actually really big deal in our industry. So
yeah. Yes, it is. All right, Kelly. Thank you so much for being on BIMThoughts.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
I think this is your third. Is this your third or fourth?
I think this is my hat trick. So I think
it's your third one.
I think it's my third. But yeah, my pleasure, and thank you guys so much for inviting me. I don't feel like we BIMmed very much, but I mean, all these kind of adjacent technologies are they're kind of important. So
we BIMmed enough.
I've BIMmed enough for one man in my life. That's for darn sure.
All right, thank you, everyone. Look out for that Discord server coming soon on the website. We'll have a link to it. And thank you so much for joining us and taking time in your valuable day to learn a little bit more about BIM and thinking.